The review of
Only one member of the Select Board, namely Tony Ferrantino, unabashedly is in favor of the Wiki-Piki conservation restriction. 3 Select Board members, Kevin Haley, Mary Rose Dickout, and Kathleen Sheridan, seem to be against the Wiki-Piki conservation restriction. Jim LeBlanc's opinion is not mentioned in that article. Yet, to my knowledge, we as Clintonians voted in favor of the Wiki-Piki restriction in 2001 at a town meeting. According to a Peter, Paul, and Mary song, this train is bound for glory, glory. If you want to get to heaven, then you gotta be holy. It seems to me that many of us Clintonians are very concerned citizens, and we want to get on that train bound for glory, glory. We don't want to be sidetracked through smoke and mirrors excuses mentioned in that Clinton item article. How can we put trust in our Select Board that authenticates our 2001 vote, which protected God's holy sanctuary and the natural habitat for birds, wildlife, forests, and watershed, namely the Wiki-Piki Reservoir? When we learn that our conservation restriction vote has been derailed through such insidious alibis as the CR may jeopardize Clinton's ability to consider commercial bottling company, or the CR may risk Clinton's potential to draw water for municipal use, or the CR needs further legal opinions, or the CR is a forced solution to forfeiting Rauscher Farm grant money. We Clintonians can only conclude that the Select Board has fallen off the tracks and disregarded the ecological balance of God's natural environment, and furthermore disrespected our 2001 vote at town meeting. As Peter, Paul, and Mary in their song, This Train, say, this train doesn't carry no jokers, no high-stepping women, no cigar smokers. And a Select Board that sidesteps the ecological crisis in our beloved town of Clinton is carrying a train of jokers and high-stepping women and cigar smokers. We want a Select Board that underscores the importance of environmental preservation. We want a Select Board that stays on track and respects our 2001 vote in favor of the conservation restriction on the Wiki-Piki Reservoir. This train will stop for the weary. This train will stop for the poor. This train will stop in the ghetto. This train will stop at the farm. If the Select Board of 2008 were to sign on the dotted line in favor of Wiki-Piki conservation restriction, then the train bound for glory, glory would charge full steam ahead, and the Commonwealth of Massachusetts officials, such as Congressman James McGovern, Senator Harriet Chandler, State Environmental Secretary Ian Bowles, and land management expert Phil Truesdale, and our own Representative Harold Naughton, who lives on Haskell Avenue, would sing our praises regarding the Wiki-Piki conservation restriction and our grassroots effort towards securing the self-help grant for Rauscher Farm as a conservation and recreational open space area for generations to come. Thank you.
Thank you, Joyce. I just want to correct a few errors there. I don't know what article you're reading, but I can tell you for one that you're quoting there, I'm not in favor of the CR. So you should get your facts straight before you come up to the board and insinuate that we're not in favor. We're working very hard to get this CR done. And it's on for executive session again tonight, where we're still discussing the wording on the conservation restriction. So I hear you, and I understand how passionate you can be about the
Yeah.
Rauscher Farm and the grant, but I can tell you, I don't think the time is there to get it done. So you can
I'm
talk
sorry,
all
I
you...
didn't understand your last statement.
I don't think the time is there. The grant, from what we're told by Mr. Loaf and the Economic Development Officer, his time is running out. And there's still issues that has to go back to the state. They have to review it, and I do not think, it's my opinion, that we have the time to get that done. So,
I've made my statement.
thank you. Mike, can we move on? Any other public comments? Yeah, we do have you on, John, in terms, we're just waiting for the chief, and I would say within 15, 20 minutes, we'll have you on. Mike, do you want to move into the town warrant?
Sure. The board has a draft copy of the warrant submitted with piles of articles for consideration for the town meeting. I mean, as we go through them, if the board wanted to kind of do them as a group or go through them quickly, or just highlight the ones that people have questions on, just let me know as we go along. The first 4, 5, 6, well, at least the first 5 articles are all standard articles that we have on every year. Well, the first 1 and 2, they're standard articles. One is to accept reports of town officers. The second is to set the compensation of elected officials. The third is the recommendation for the non-union employees at 3% level increment for a cost of living adjustment. Fourth is the actual budget. Fifth is the compensating balance agreement. 6 is the social services program. Again, this is a standard article. It's usually on every year. 7 is the assessment for wheat, which is on every year as a standard article. Number 8 is the money for a cruiser. We usually have on at least one every year. We do a 1-2 ratio. This year it's for 1 police cruiser to replace in the fleet. Number 9 is a sum to pay retroactive wages for a negotiated settlement with the Clinton Police Department. Number 10 is a request from the assessors for funding for their upcoming FY09 100% total property revaluation for number 10. Number 11 is an article from the Superintendent of Public Works looking for funding for a new water tank under the hill. The Superintendent of Public Works is here if the board has any discussion they would like to have further on that issue.
You're smiling.
Well, I guess it's no secret that we need a new water tank up Bird Hill. I think I've been putting that in my monthly reports for quite some time. We did have divers go in every 5 years. We are required to inspect the inside of all the tanks, and divers went in, and to no surprise, you know, the inside coating is completely failed. The thickness of the metal is extremely thin in places, and it's not worth saving the tank. I don't even know what year that tank was built, but it's an old riveted steel tank. If you went up there to look at it, you'll see it's really in disrepair, and it's holding water, but if you looked at the inside of it, the whole coating is gone, and there's, you know, a bottom layer of you know, paint and silt and basically crap inside the tank. So our thought is to replace that with a slightly larger tank, probably not located in the same spot, because we wouldn't be able to fit a larger tank in the same spot where we are. And I think we can make better use of the site actually if we move it a little bit and to be further away from all the residences up there. So basically, it's a $1.8 million to do all that work and associated work. I think while we're there, I wanted to do some fencing, replace some fencing, and it all depends how the numbers add up. But I think a few years back when they did the other 1.5 million gallon tank, they replaced the fence on one side. And the plan has always been to, when the money's there, to continue and replace the rest of it. And with any luck, we'd be able to replace either most or all of the rest of that fencing. The reason why the timing is that I've known this tank has been a problem since I've gotten here. Obviously, it's not that in the past year or so it's gotten that much worse. But what's happening is we have bonds on the last tank and on several other projects, 4 projects in total that the last payment on the notes is FY010 for 2 of them, or FY10 for 2 of them, and FY11 for 2 others. Total payments on those would be somewhere in the neighborhood of $230,000 to $240,000. And basically this will, it won't impact the budget. I mean, we won't be able to drop costs, but it's something that really needs to be done. But it's not adding any debt payment. Their debt payment will stay basically the same. It'll actually be less in 2 years. The first year it'll be close, and the second year of it will be, we'll still have less debt payments than we have right now. And it's really a critical component of the water system, both quality and quantity. A slightly larger tank will give us much better fire protection. Right now, because of the plant slows down the pace that we can make water compared to what we used to do before the plant was there. We used to just have to pump it to keep the tank full. We get a big fire right now, those tanks, we have all we can do to keep those things full. So an extra 3/4 gallon capacity will help that out. That Regency fire, we had trouble getting water to the hospital. It was, they were drawing that much water. We had a lot of trouble keeping the hospital water. We had to shut hydrants down that were trying to fight the fire. I mean, it was a big fire and a lot of trucks on it, and other towns were here, so it was probably a worst case scenario, but we had all we could do to keep the hospital in water. So basically all those reasons, and the timing is good because we got some notes coming due. I mean, I'd rather never have to borrow again, but that's not realistic.
That was my next question. You said the first year we had payments slightly higher. Are we able to absorb that in our fund now?
A lot of it depends. Yeah, we will be able to.
Without
I mean,
increasing,
it's basically what we would do is out of improvements that year, that would be part of the improvements. If we have a $20,000 discrepancy, I would just take it out of improvements, because the following year, like I said, we'll have probably another $100,000 coming due. So I think the timing is right. There'll be no payments this fiscal year. The first payment would be FY10. We're going to get SRF funding. We'll apply for SRF funding, which they don't have 0% loans anymore. The whole filtration plant is basically 0% loan, but it's 2% loan, so it's a great,
I just think it's important that we don't have to increase our rates on the water.
Yeah, that's the plan, is not to do that. I'm not saying we won't have to for other reasons, but
Right.
because of this borrowing, that's not, we're not going to be going to the town saying we need to raise rates to cover this borrowing. It can be covered under the budget as is right now.
Thanks, Chris. Any other questions from the board?
One question. Sure. It's a steel tank, right?
Right now it's a steel tank.
Can we get any money for scrap steel?
Oh yeah, that'll all be part of the I would probably do it separately. I would probably have the demolition of that tank done by, separately, and we probably would get money back for that. Yeah.
Okay, good.
Yeah, I would say almost certainly we'd get money back for that. Steel is, a year and a half from now, 2 years from now, steel could be down, who knows? But as of right now, it would be worth some money for sure.
Okay.
And there's other issues, actually I should bring them up now, is there's, I've been talking to the fire chief, there's radio towers on the tanks right now on that steel tank, which they'll stay in place right now. The idea is to probably put a freestanding antenna, and I don't know exactly what, the radios aren't my thing, but Chief Hart has been looking into that. Instead of putting them on, I'm really dead against putting antennas on water tanks. They don't belong there. It's a great place to put them, but they really don't belong there. And so we would look into at the same time, because we're going to have to relocate them anyways. It's going to be a cost. So instead of doing that, we put a freestanding tower up, and it'll all be
Take a look at it,
nice.
let us know.
I will. I will keep you informed.
Thank you.
You got it.
Mike? Back at the Article 12?
Next is a funding request from the Parks and Recreation Commission to repair to the electrical lighthouse at Savage Field. They're having some electrical issues down there, and they need to totally revamp that structure, or at least the electrical portion of the structure. The next article, we're asking to remove that from the Parks and Rec. Again, they submitted that with their budget, as a request with their budget, but they are not asking that to go forward to town meeting. So they did get a call today from the director asking that article be removed. The next is funding for repairs to the Veterans Memorial in front of Town Hall. It's very weathered and worn. This would take, kind of redo all the brass on the plaques, try to reposition some of the granite, and bring it back to its original luster. It's about a $15,000 line item. It's something that's just, needs to be done if it's able to be done this year. I know it's a tight year, but it's just something we've been getting prices on in the past, and we're just putting it forward for consideration. The next article is an estimate that we gave to the board recently. This is to replace and reconstruct the playbill structures on the Walnut Street side of the town hall.
Which is just about falling off.
Right, I mean, but there's some severe rust. However, what this cost for $46,000 is to totally remove them, send them to a place in Alabama, recast them, refinish them, and then bring them back as is. There's been some other thoughts about maybe just taking down the rusted part of the playbill and just bringing the light a little bit lower. So for $46,000 was a big chunk of money, if it's something that we wanted to look into other options. But the company that did the fountain with the statues at Central Park is the company that gave a price on this. And again, they would come up, dismantle it, bring it back to Alabama, recast it, and then bring it back.
That price might we have to get more than one.
We would probably have to go out to bid for it, absolutely. But again, with the tight year, I know it's a lot of money, but just putting it forward for discussion.
At the very least, I think we should at least take those down, store them until we actually have to.
Have we defer that to our custodian to decide if it's...
Yeah, I talked to Niven, and he said kids were leaning on one and one almost fell over. So he's saying that, he's actually saying they're unsafe.
Yeah, and there was some money at last year's town meeting that was authorized to do repair to those, so if it's a matter of wanting to take them down for the temporary, I think that funding should be able to cover that, to take them down and do some, temporary repair to it, but there was a $10,000 line item last year that was authorized for that, so.
Mr. Chairman, I would recommend that the custodian work with the administrator to see if we could come up with maybe some other alternatives. I know that, remember that night we went out and looked at it? It seems like the base is fairly solid, but that one extended piece is the one that's really rusted away. I remember we had talked about, Tony, maybe just having to take that piece off.
Yeah, I think that's a prudent thing to do, in
Yeah.
my opinion. That one's out of the window.
So, I mean, I would recommend that we, have the administrator coordinate with the custodian to see if we could come up with some other alternatives rather than dismantling the entire thing, because like I said, the base looks fairly, I don't know, you would know better than I would.
I'm not an expert, but just talking to Niven and doing a visual inspection, it seems, what might be prudent to find another avenue to fix it, so. So I agree with that, yeah.
You all set with that, Mike?
Sure. The next item is a request from the library for funding to remove the underground oil tank, storage tank on the front lawn of their property. Last year, they received funding to put in a new boiler and a new oil tank inside the building. They have the old underground storage tank, which does need to be removed. They didn't know the cost, that they kind of went forward with the cost to put in their new system, and then within so many months thereafter, they're obligated to address the tank. So there is a state grant program, the underground storage tank grant reimbursement program, where the town could get, for municipalities can get 50% back for removing it, as it is such a big issue. They want them out of the ground. So the estimate is $4,000 to $5,000. And the town would get 50% back on whatever we spend. The only thing is it's a reimbursement program, so it's not 110% guarantee. I think we're pretty short, because I don't think they use all their funding every year, so we should be pretty confident we're gonna get it, but it's not an ironclad guarantee, so I think we need to appropriate the full amount and then apply for the reimbursement once the work is done and hope that we get the 50% back. But I think for that short money, it would alleviate a huge concern of getting that tank out of there. So, the next item was a request from the superintendent of schools.
That's a request that Mr. Gall and Mr. Bailey are going to come to our next meeting and share, transferring some funds from the elementary construction over to the old fire station for repairs, windows, and we'd like to address us at our next meeting, so.
The question is, though, I mean, this is to get authority from the town to do that?
Right.
So does it matter what,
Well, I think the article needs to be put on, it's up to the selectmen to put the article on the warrant, but what it would need is town meeting approval in order to
transfer
reprogram
funds
the
out of the
funds.
construction budget.
Yeah, the funds have been appropriated for the elementary school, but there is a balance in that project due to a settlement of litigation, and the superintendent would like to reprogram that to the old fire station, which they can do under the statute, but it needs town meeting approval in order to reappropriate those
We need
funds.
like the selectmen's support, so that's why he's just coming before us. Keep us. Yeah, he just wants to share it with us. Thanks, Mark. 18?
The next item is a request to give the Board of Selectmen authorization to acquire easements necessary for the replacement of the Water Street Bridge. That project will hopefully be going out to bid this summer with construction next year. Before they'll go out to bid, it's a town bridge, so the town needs to do all the easements and legal requirements of those properties. This is an article the town solicitor drafted, which would give the selectmen the authority to enter into agreements to take these properties. They're strips of land along for sidewalks and for widening of the bridge and different things that we're going to need to complete that project. I wasn't able to get the information for tonight, but we have an easement line item, and I need to check to see how much money is in that, because otherwise, if we feel there might potentially be a cost for this, we would have to appropriate funding to do that, but I will check to see what our status is, because we had a fund that we acquired the easements for the traffic light project, so we do have an easement fund. I just don't know how much we've depleted that, if there would be enough, or what we would estimate to be enough to cover this, the need for this project here on Water Street, so. But it's something that the state will not go forward with bidding until we have acquired all the easements under the plan that's been designed.
It's been long enough for that bridge,
Yeah.
so I say the sooner the better.
Sooner the better. That's true.
So this way we'll have
Roll
all
from one
our,
bridge to the other.
yeah, all our ducks will be in order, so then it'll be on to the state, the ball will be in their court to move forward after that. Otherwise, if we wait till next year's town meeting, it'll be too late. The next article is similar. It would authorize the Board of Selectmen to acquire easements in connection with the Nitro Pleasant Street project. This would be to do some drainage repairs and infrastructure repairs, but we'll need to take some property, and it's my understanding, I know the Superintendent of Public Works is here to clarify, but I believe it's my understanding that there will be some property that Nitro will be donating to the town.
I think a permanent easement is probably the way we would do it. It would be a permanent easement on Nitro property for we have to build a little retaining wall and some stairs. Question on the stairs, we might not take an easement, it might just be a temporary easement for the stairs, but where the retaining wall is, so we can maintain the parking area, we would get a permanent easement from there.
And we're not anticipating there'll be a cost associated with that project there, so it's something that's gonna help, it's gonna help their property, so they are willing to convey that as, you know, as a no fee to the town, so that's why we don't have a financial line item in there, and that one there.
yeah, and isn't this part of a whole series of programs that, I mean, it's going to have job creation?
Right.
Yes, that was part of the grant.
Yeah.
Right. That's how they were able to get the grant to do that, because of the expansions and the economic development that they're doing on that site. So. The next is a request by the assessors for acceptance of the local option for Chapter 59, Section 5, Clause 16 and 16A. What this would do, it would allow the town to exempt from the personal property tax any research and development corporation or limited liability company that would come to Clinton that specifically engages in research and development. So any of their personal property, we do have a threshold, but anything that would be subject, any of the equipment or their machines or anything within the business that would be subject to the personal property tax, this would exempt. I believe, according to Mr. Baird, the Chairman of the Board of Assessors, he does not believe that there are any companies that would currently qualify for this, so it would not reduce in their current taxation. It would be just if there was a company that was enticed to come to Clinton, that this might have been a reason that they might look at the town to do.
I just have some concerns with it, Mike. We've been using TIFs pretty good here. I don't like to exempt anybody from, taxes and paying their fair share. TIFs gives us the ability to do it over a period of years or for a number of years, and then they begin to pay. This seems to me, I don't know, I'm just not real comfortable with giving exemptions.
Yeah, I look at, Mr. Chairman, I just look at it as another tool in the chest. And whether you take it out to do the task or not, we decide, with our planning boards and
Would it be a final decision of the Board of Selectmen to grant this exemption?
I don't want to put
That
the
would be my
solicitor on the
question.
spot because I haven't given them the warrant to review yet for legal substance.
Maybe we
But
can have
I think
the
if
assessor.
it's a local option for acceptance, and I think if it is,
Why don't-
it gives the assessors the ability to abate those taxes, I believe, so.
Yeah, I don't know the answer to that. I have to look into it.
Yeah. Could we, go ahead, Tony, you had the,
Well, I was just thinking if maybe he could come before us and
Maybe.
quickly and give us an overview of,
Why they put it on, yeah.
or give us
Yeah,
the
the
language.
question is whether or not it's mandatory versus discretionary.
Right.
And once you.
Yeah, that's the other question I might have too. Is it going to be discretionary? Do we have the ability? That's another good question. I'd like to see, I guess, Chapter 59, Section 5, Clauses 16 and 16A, so I could,
Yeah, I'll send you a copy if you want.
if you go.
So
So
you'd
we
like
can,
to have the assessors recommend this.
well, that's, and how do you get rid of it? And if it's not, like
think-
he's saying discretionary, then anyone that wants to.
I mean, it's
come
coming
to
from his office, maybe he can just give us a quick
Yeah.
overview.
town. Once we see it, then maybe we can ask him to come in the next. Go ahead, Mike. 21. Oh, unless anyone else has something on that one?
The next item is just a placeholder that I put in. I know the personnel board was working on some bylaw changes. I haven't been contacted by them to go forward with anything. I just put it in as a placeholder.
I would take it
So I
off,
think-
Mike, if you haven't heard from them now. Unless another board member's heard from.
No.
The next item is a expedited permitting to accept the provisions of Chapter 43D to allow for expedited permitting. This one and the next article, which is to amend the zoning bylaw to include a zoning biotech provision in the zoning bylaw. The Economic Development Director indicated to me, I got a message from him that he had submitted me an email with wording for these two articles. These are placeholders, as the board talked about their last meeting. Mr. Fiorentino had brought up about the master plan committee had asked to go forward with these. So I put in these placeholders. Mr. Lowe indicated he sent me an email today. My schedule has just been tight all day. I haven't even checked my email to get those out, so
Yeah, I
I should be able to.
Those are all part of that presentation, so.
Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, I think Kathy and Jim probably need to be brought up on the 43D. Oh, I think Jim was here that night.
I was here.
Kathy, yeah, so that, for an
Yeah.
understanding of a Kathy, because it's money that we would get for, but,
You can get your copies of the
yeah.
presentation.
Yeah.
and, yeah, and they're-
Yeah, and they had left us extra copies from that night, so the mass development that night, so I do have some paperwork that I could give to the selection.
Yeah, I know we had talked about this before. I mean, I think there's going to be amendments to these, and that's okay, as long as they're brought before us, before this document closes, correct?
Correct. Donnie was still working on the
Yeah, 'cause-
properties that were going to be identified and
Properties, and they're breaking them out by property so
Yeah,
that,
identify
the
certain ones.
the
Yeah, I
town
think we're
may...
just going, this is just the first run of
Okay.
this, yeah.
Yeah, this is just a placeholder, and then we would need, I guess Mr. Lowe did indicate that is that other wording he just emailed me today would list the parcels that would be affected. So this 43D isn't blanket for the whole town. You have to identify what properties would come under the expedited permitting, so.
Thanks, Mike. 24.
That's 22, 23, 24. That is an issue that we discussed over the selectmen discussed over the past year. We have been over quota on our liquor licenses. And there was a desire to approach the state to try to get those back. They have been historically, have been in Clinton forever, and once we are over quota, you can, if you get those licenses returned, you cannot reissue them until you're under quota. So we were over quota, licenses were canceled, and then we found that we could not reissue those. So I think we went, myself and town solicitor, former town solicitor, went to the ABCC. We tried to make an argument. They understood where we're coming from, but they indicated they had no jurisdiction because the state statute sets the quota. They could not help us. The only way we could do was to exempt Clinton from the quota and allow us to have more than what the quota would allow. And this has been done quite often. I mean, cities do it frequently. Towns have done it in the past. Even Clinton has done it for another.
But again, Mike, it's important to remember that it's two that we just lost, that we're trying to just replace and have on hand for restaurants that want to come to town.
Exactly, yeah. And they have been for at least 50 years or better. We had that many in the community. The community had supported that many licenses. They had expected and were pretty much consenting to those many licenses, and now we're two less than we thought, which is hampering the ability to attract new businesses or to give opportunities for new businesses to open. The ABCC had indicated that the legislature has been receptive to allowing new licenses in communities, especially for economic development. So if you could show that it was going to really, bolster the community or create jobs, that they had been pretty good about it. Again, the wording, we could work with solicitor. I just kind of developed some wording as a placeholder, similar to what we had used in the past, because Clinton has done this one other time for an all-alcohol package license. Now, we're putting a condition, again, of economic development on that, whether we want to keep that there to entice the legislature, or maybe we could just keep it general or more broad, and maybe we can get some advice from town council on that. The next 5 are citizen petitions. They had been certified that they required number of signatures from the town clerk, so they're obligated to be concluded on the warrant and put forward to the townspeople for consideration. The first one is $40,000 to reconstruct a ball field at Fuller Field. The next one is an article to direct the town solicitor acting through the law committee to participate in litigation necessary to protect the Clintons Police Department's right to use the rifle range. And the next one is a citizen petition to vote to restrict the use of land off South Meadow Road for education and recreation use. The next one is a...
Can we back up just a minute? Don't we already have one that the town voted on? That Jim, you had brought that up?
It's wildlife, it was restricted to passive recreation wildlife habitat in 1999.
So maybe, I don't know, Mike, if that makes this a moot point, or is that going to override this?
Well, I think it's a citizen petition, so it has to go on. I have not discussed with any of the people that signed this. I don't know what their intent is or why they're putting it forward.
Could you check into that? We have one that we should...
Well, the citizen petition has to go on.
Right, I think what they were asking if the previous vote of town meeting would be in conflict or
Be mute if we vote this.
Redundant.
Yeah. Yeah.
we can get you the information.
That's fine.
Sorry, Mike, 28?
The next article is to rescind acceptance of Chapter 48, Section 42, which has been done in the past by the town, would establish a fire department under the direction and control of the fire chief. And then 29 would accept the provisions of Chapter 48, Section 42A, which would put the establishment of the fire department under the direction of Board of Selectmen. So those two were also citizen petitions with the required signatures under the statute.
So, Mr. Chairman? Yep. Mike, is it possible we can get a copy of the petitions that were submitted?
Absolutely, I did, I apologize, I do have them, and it was my intent to include them as part of the document, and I forgot. So there's certainly, you certainly should have a copy of anything, and any other correspondence or backup information that might be available, I will certainly include to you as soon as possible.
Mike, do you want to add this, or have a discussion about this restriction from the building inspector? Do you want to add this as 30?
I think that, and Mr. Zahariadis is here this evening, I believe. I don't know if he's, oh, there he is, right here. So I think his hope was to have you, the board, consider it. It's the acceptance of the statute on the leaning of the fees and fines.
Yes. Can we talk about it?
Sure, if you want.
Please.
Hello?
How you doing, Tony?
I wanted to start a policy as far as, I spoke to Chief Hart and other inspectors in the town, and try to adopt this in order to be able to start inspecting apartment buildings in the town. They seem to be neglected, and we don't really have any recourse against the owners, and we get tied up in litigation. So what I wanted to do is if we adopt this statute, what we'll end up doing is, if we fine them and they don't want to pay their fine, they ignore it, they try to send us into court, we can attach it onto their real estate taxes, and they have to pay that prior to paying their real estate taxes. It's part of a multi-step policy which I'm trying to implement. We've been talking with Mike about it, and what we're trying to do is get proactive as far as getting these people that own these multifamily units to start fixing these things and to take care of the neighborhood that they're in. And that's one part of what I'd like to plan to initiate this thing.
So, Mr. Chairman, I would move that we put this on the warrant.
Do we have a second? Any further discussion? Nice job, Tony. All those in favor?
Aye. Okay.
Thanks, Tony.
So I don't know if the board wanted to tentatively approve, remove the articles that we discussed and approve the other articles, or if you want to wait for some presentations at the next meeting. Or...
We need to wait, Mike, just to, next meeting, and then we'll set the warrant.
When's the next meeting? Just
2 weeks, unless we go, if there's a need to go sooner.
Also, Mr. Chairman, I know that we had asked the solicitor to give us an opinion about whether we need to go with an article to town meeting to change the,
You're right on my agenda.
okay.
But since you brought it up, Bob,
Go ahead.
do you have your opinion on the town administrator duties as we asked at our last meeting?
Yeah, the current town administrator was appointed pursuant to Mass General Law, Chapter 41, Section 23. We took a look at that, and it's our interpretation under that particular section of that statute, that while the town administrator can perform the traditional functions such as oversight, supervision, administration of the affairs of the town, he cannot be delegated by the Board of Selectmen to do hiring or firing, especially since those could potentially involve constitutional issues. It would therefore require that this town either adopt a charter or it be done through a special act of the legislation. And the way we would do that is we would have to put it on as an article to get town approval to pursue the special act, which then would, that act would outline the additional powers that the town administrator would have to do the hiring, the firing, or the removal of any employees or any boards that come within the jurisdiction of the Board of Selectmen. So the mechanism to do that at this time would be to put it on as an article on the town warrant, and then after that, pursue a special act.
Mr. Chairman, I would move that we go forward and have the administrator write the article up.
Is a motion?
Second.
Second.
I'll second it.
Any further discussion?
No, so that, just on the discussion, so we can't open the contract, right?
That's
So
correct.
that's clear. We can only add duties based on a town meeting or a special act, right? Is that
Right.
so?
Well, The town meeting would be the first step. In other words, here, we would have to go to town meeting, get town meeting vote, and then go the special act.
Okay.
The other way to do it would be if you had the towns that do have a strong administrator have charters, or they have gone this exact route of having it approved at town meeting and then go through a special act.
Okay, so the people at town meeting decide. Okay, so I'm okay with that.
Any other discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None? Unanimous choice? Next it's not on the agenda, but I think I see members of Clinton Turner's here. Is Phil want to come forward? And the chief is here. You're right there in the front. And Tony's here. We've had another, this seems to be an ongoing issue between the fire chief, building inspector, and Turner's. I had thought this was going to come to a resolution a month ago. I was informed that the state fire marshal was out and inspected it. There were 2 issues that had to be taken care of. I think both issues were taken care of, and now the chief has not signed off on the liquor license for the year. So I'd like to hear from Turner's, Phil.
Yes, my name is Dale Moganowski. I'm Vice President of Turner's.
John Barry, House Committee.
And of course, we struggled with this issue for many months, and we were before the Select Board again on April 9th, because we still had not seen the state fire marshal. The state fire marshal did come out to our facility finally on April 15th and conducted an inspection. In that inspection, he found 2 things that he wanted us to correct. They were both door closers that had to be added to one to a boiler room door and another one to I think it was a stairwell door. We corrected those issues. The state fire marshal signed off on everything on April 30th and faxed a copy of his report to the building inspector here on April 30th. Again, in May, we received another temporary certificate instead of a full certificate, as we were told we were going to get. I'd like, if I could, to read a letter that we have dated January 31st, 2008, from Chief Hart. In that letter, it says, I am attaching a new temporary certificate for your facility that is valid through February 29th, 2008. After recent discussions and concerns from the board members of Turner Hall to the Board of Selectmen, I will be having a representative of the State Fire Marshal's Office complete this year's inspection of your facility before a permanent certificate can be issued. The last inspection by a fire professional was prior to the letter dated December 5th to you from Commissioner Dillon, and no final inspection has been completed to date. A representative from the State Fire Marshal's Office will be visiting the club in the near future for an inspection. When he completes his review and all requirements, concerns, or recommendations he may have are corrected, I will sign the certificate for the remainder of the year. Thank you for your cooperation in these matters. Sincerely, Richard J. Hart, Fire Chief. That's dated January 31st. It clearly states in the letter that as soon as the fire marshal signs off on things that we would get our permanent certificate. Also, the building commissioner and the selectmen were copied on this letter. We have met every condition, I think, that we're asked to do.
Tony, do you have anything to add? Did you participate in any way in the inspection after?
I participated in the inspections that Tom Dillon left behind. There were deficiencies, and they corrected all of them. But there was the issue with the fire marshal going in to do his inspection, so we couldn't sign permanent 304. So we had to wait till he went to did his. And
On April 30th, if I may.
Yeah.
April 30th, I had asked for time off, so I was taking the day off. Do my yard work and get ready for the end of the burn season. I couldn't get a permit much later. So I'd asked for the day off. Mike had asked me to come in for a traffic committee meeting that was pretty urgent. I agreed to come in for that meeting. At that point, we still hadn't heard from the state fire marshal's office. I had talked to Tony. Tony brought the temporary up for the month of May. We're still pending the fire marshal's report. I think I left here about 11:15. I went and did my yard work. I had signed the temporary for the month of May. The first and second, I was away. When I got back to the office, I had a fax at 3:33 on April 30th, indicating the fire marshal would check the door closers and they were in place. So they have a temporary, there's no interruption in anything. We're obligated to do this at the end of the month anyway. Rather than duplicate it, I just figure it's in place. There is one pending issue with them. It deals with a fire lane that if it don't get resolved, I'll be coming back to the board and asking you to rescind the permanent when we do issue it. But that's a separate item.
Am I understanding here that we will have our permanent certificate at the end of this month?
I got a question for the chief. Is there a reason why we wouldn't sign it, or you wouldn't sign it now, just to avoid this, and let's give them the year, and if you've got another issue, then I think they've been very willing to address whatever issues have come
I
up.
don't mind, it's just a duplication of effort. You know, we signed it, we made it legal, we rushed, we did everything we could to keep them in continuity as far as the certificate goes.
Do I need to ask for, I would like you to sign that. Do I need to ask for a board vote? I'd rather have you just agree to it.
I think that's probably the only way here, and I will agree to sign one till December 31st, but I could be back if I don't get
That's fine.
cooperation.
Do we have,
Mr. Chairman, I'll move that we instruct the chief to sign the permit through December 31st, 2008.
do we have a second? Any further discussion?
Under discussion, I think what he's looking for is a response to the citation or the violation. I mean, do you have a plan to respond to the chief?
If you'd like us to, we can address it. We were going to receive the letter on February.
Yeah, John,
Mr. Chairman.
that's a second issue, so I'd like to just get the vote, and then if we have issues on
My
that.
understanding is we're dealing with the issue
Correct.
of the violations that the chief brought the state's fire marshal.
We'd be happy to go
that
back to
They
that.
have met all of the criteria, and that the state fire marshal signed off, and that Tony did, and that the only signature that we're waiting for is the fire chief.
Correct.
Correct? I mean, unless so I think that's a separate, at least I see that as a subsequent issue that came up.
Correct.
Yeah, and I'm just, I want to understand, it sounds like our chief, just so I understand it clearly, is he's seeing this as a way to force the response to the violation, which he has not received yet.
Correct.
So that's why he is not comfortable yet to sign it for the rest of the year, and that's what he's trying to tell us.
If I may, we responded to that, and subsequently we sent back certified mail, checked off in the citation that we are appealing that, and we don't agree with the fine, and we really believe that the letter that he sent us, if you read it, there's no time date in there for us to reply back to him. There was a request for us to reply back. It's not a requirement that we reply back, and we were not given what the violation was, and we were not given the time frame in which to correct it, and then we received a $100 fine. But we checked it off, we sent it back, said we're going to request a hearing on that, and that's where it's going to take action from there.
Which is fine. So, are there any other discussions on whether we should have him sign or not at this time? And then we can go back to this discussion, because I'd love to get back into that. Being none, all those in favor? Aye. Opposed? One opposed, John is opposed.
Just to explain my reason, he's not in favor of signing it right now, because there is a temporary permit in place for the month of May, and pending this issue, so.
So now,
that's the only reason.
we heard that, go ahead, on this issue,
I really don't want to make this the forum to deal with the fire department matters.
neither do I.
In 6 months, I haven't heard from the town hall as far as any violations go, as far as any communications go. They were ordered in their letter, and there isn't a time frame in it. We're supposed to comply with the code when we are. But I discourage any of this being brought before the board. They have appealed their ticket, the citation.
And that's going to go
It's
forward.
in the process. They gave it to the hearing officer. I'm supposed to set up a date and set up the hearing.
Correct.
Thank you.
And then, if that's not addressed at the hearing, then I would imagine, Chief, you'd be back before us with this issue.
Right.
Thank you.
And who is the hearing officer for the town?
Chief, who is it's up at the court, but
Jack
is it Jack Morris?
Okay, that's, we just wanted who that was.
Yep. Thank you for coming in.
Thank you.
Okay, I'd like to thank the Select Board for their time here today.
Thank you.
I think we've seen our fellow selectman from Sterling come in. Would you like to come forward? Yeah, over here. Come on up.
Point of order.
Yes? Gloria? Yeah, we had public comment, but I'll be willing to listen to you when we finish up again. I'll be happy to reopen that, Gloria, after. You all set? Thank you for coming over. I see you won the election. Congratulations. And I think tonight we wanted to have you in just to get your thoughts. I know you were here a couple weeks ago, but to get your thoughts on the Wiki-Piki property or watershed, what you would like to see from, I would imagine, your feedback from your community. And then if there's any questions, please ask us, and I'm sure my fellow board members would have questions of you also. So I'm not sure if you have a statement or you just...
Mr. Murray's the chairman, so we'll let him lead off.
All right, we did come here tonight, Don Murray, Chairman of the Board of Selectmen.
Nice to meet you.
We did come here tonight looking for an audience so that we could kind of throw some things out there and see what your replies would be to how we feel about that property, because it is in our town. And I think what we would like to know is where you're at with the CR that's available or been presented to you for that property, and if you're working toward enacting that, and if indeed you are, then there's probably other things that we can discuss about the property also that would pertain to the town of Sterling. I'm not sure how familiar any of you are with that property. I don't know whether you've ever walked it or...
I have been on it.
You have? Okay, yeah.
I've never been on it. Google Earth.
I've grown up on that property, and so I'm very familiar with it. I live in one. I own a farm right beside it, so we're right on top of the beginning of the aquifer there, and I would like to see it preserved forever, if it's indeed a possibility. And so I guess my first question would be to find out what your feelings are on your CR and where you're at with that, and if it's available to us to look at also, to see how it would affect us.
I guess I have to be careful what I say. Town solicitor, would you stop me if I go too far? But we do have the Wiki-Piki conservation restriction on for executive session again this evening. We're working to complete the conservation restriction, and again, it's been an ongoing discussion with the state. We give them our request, they give us their feedback, whether they accept our request, and we've done that a number of times, and we're down to, I guess I don't want to be too specific, but I would say a handful of issues that I'm hoping that we may be able to get through tonight after we close our open session, and be prepared to instruct our solicitor to respond. And then again, it would be up to the state to respond to us. I'd be guessing if I would say, will they accept everything? They may not, and it could go on. We're trying to enter into a reasonable agreement to conserve the property known as the Wiki-Piki. We heard nothing different at our meeting a couple weeks ago from either our town members or yourselves, and I would encourage any other selectmen, if I'm incorrect, to speak.
I have a couple of comments.
Yes,
Sure.
Yeah.
Yes, my name is Paul Suschek. I want to thank you all for allowing us to come down here and to talk about this issue. As I see it, and as we held a discussion at our meeting tonight before we came here, the Wiki-Piki is one of the white elephants in the room in the town of Sterling. It's a large piece of property. It's been, exclusively used as a water source until I think the early 1960s. The town of Clinton is now looking at a conservation restriction, enacting a conservation restriction. You have some issues with the dam up there. And really what I think ought to happen is that you people ought to enact the conservation restriction. And I think the town of Sterling and the town of Clinton ought to work it out so the town of Sterling has a legal possessory interest, a fee interest in the real estate. And I think we ought to involve the city of Leominster, because I think that the time is now to try to preserve and protect that natural resource for the future. I think that water may be a very scarce commodity 25 or 30 years from now. And we now have to take some steps to do that. And certainly, I think, our townspeople are telling us that they want to see that land preserved in its natural sylvan state. It's a very pretty piece of property. I've been on it many, many times, and I know I would encourage all of you to walk it. But the fact of the matter is that I really want to advocate for the enactment of the conservation restriction on the property, and for you people to consider Sterling having, either through purchase, acquisition, whatever have you, some type of fee interest in the real estate. Because that way, we could work together to preserve that property, to maintain the dams, and I think we ought to talk up to possibly the town of Lancaster, because they may have some water needs, and also to the city of Leominster. It's really, I think it should be a regional approach, ladies and gentlemen. And that's really where I'm at. I think it's time to work this out for us to acquire fee interest in the property, and therefore set the stage for the next 25, 50 years. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Paul.
Can I only say a couple of words?
Absolutely.
My esteemed gentlemen, friends here have already said a few things. Thank you for having us again. I appreciate that very much so. And I'm pretty much in agreement with what Mr. Suschek has had to say. I am interested in making sure that CR, something happens with that CR, and I would encourage you to move forward with that, certainly. I think that we as a town have discussed this both with the committee that was formed to promote saving the site and others. We've discussed ways that we might make it profitable. Certainly not as much as an outside interest, as has already indicated, but certainly for the long term, that would make it profitable for both communities, if it's just 2 or even possibly 3 or 4 communities. And I wrote this up in a recent article that I put in the paper relative to my re-election campaign. So you may have read it, you may not have, but I'll repeat it very quickly here. There are things like a forestry management program. If the CR certainly would allow some of that, we could do it. I know the DCR does it. They own a lot of land in Sterling, and they do it every time they take a piece of property. We have a forestry management committee right now that's looking at our own town forests and how we can get some income from that without destroying or clear-cutting the forest. It's a good forestry management program. We are a municipal electric light plant. As a municipal department, I've already had our general manager look at the possibility of putting in a small mini hydro plant there. Small amount of electricity, but over a long period of time, obviously, those kilowatt hours accumulate. And I think that might be something, certainly that Sterling would like to benefit from that aspect if something could be done with that. There are other issues, the Orr House that's there, we're sitting right there right now. I don't know if there's an enterprise system that Clinton might want to establish and maybe repair the structure and rent it, lease it, whatever. You might have some income from that. Some groups here in town, your own citizens might have some other thoughts on things, but all of those things could coexist with bikeways, pathways. We might even use some of those reservoirs as fire ponds up there. I think there's enough imagination within both communities, initially anyway, to come up with a number of things maybe we haven't even thought about. The Haywood is right next to the Fallbrook, as you're well aware, and I know that Leominster would probably like to use that as a backup water source and maybe even use it at times of stress on their own system, and that's certainly a possibility. You might be able to sell some water to, surface water anyway, to the town of Leominster. I'm not so sure how Lancaster might play into this. I know they have wells located in the area and into the Weeki-Peaky, but I'm not sure how much they actually use those particular wells. So those are just right off the top of my head, some things that we might look at and do to try to establish some income for. We know that you need some income from it, and certainly have been looking at that aspect for many years. And I think this is one way to satisfy that. Again, it's going to be nowhere near what some other entity might be able to pay you, but it is something that will allow us to preserve the property, keep it as open space within our community, and you still get something out of it from that respect. And we could certainly help you if there was a forestry management program that would need to be started. We've got some actual foresters in town that have started to develop this. We have a committee that's working on it right now, and they're doing a good job. So those would be things that we think that we might be able to get together on and get something out of. I think that the last point of the whole piece here is really the dam safety issue. And ODS has issued that. You're very familiar with it, I'm sure, the protection order and the repair order. And I certainly would like to see something move forward on that, because our citizens are obviously impacted by that, or the potential impact is there, and we have to advocate for those individuals, and we certainly would like to do that here. So,
Good ideas.
Thank you very much.
I think, Chris, could you put a little bit of light on dams and the condition that we feel they're in right now? Chris is actually at DPW, and
There's 5 dams that had to be inspected under the new DCR rules and regulations, one of which is the Lower Lindy Dam, which was deemed unsafe. And it was unsafe, there's no question about it. The other dams, I believe all of them were in poor condition. All of them are in need, and we're in the process of doing repairs to all of them. The Lower Lindy Dam is now in fair condition, so we've gone from unsafe, skipped poor, and gone to fair condition. So the dam that is the biggest, it's not the biggest threat, because the Haywood is obviously the biggest dam, but it's the dam that was the biggest problem is now in fair condition, which, quite frankly, if the hydraulics work and the overflow is big enough, I wouldn't bring it, from our point of view, from the town of Clinton, I wouldn't go trying to put this thing in new condition, because we don't use the dam just to hold back the water. A fair condition, as far as I'm concerned, is adequate for that dam. So if we could get the other ones all to fair condition, then I think that's what we're probably striving to do. So the one that's the biggest concern and the biggest problem that the state has is now safe. It's in fair condition. So I think that's the biggest problem we have, and we've addressed that.
Well, that's good news.
That is good news, yes, right.
Excuse me, in addressing that, does that mean that the water level has to be controlled?
No, we've done control the water level. We had to control the water level while we did all the repair.
So that can reach full capacity.
It is, as we speak, yeah, it's overflowing as we speak, so. And there's issues, we had a reinspection, actually, that just got the report, I believe, yesterday, every 6 months you got to do re-inspections, and we have that. I haven't gotten through the whole thing yet, but there's gonna be more work that we have to be doing, you'll be seeing us up there. This spring, actually, we're gonna do some clearing out there, so.
Would those reports be available to us?
Oh, absolutely, yes, yeah, absolutely. Give me a bring them down to DPW.
No, that's...
Absolutely.
That's fine, that's fine.
Thank you.
See, my understanding too, that there are grants available through the DEP for protecting public drinking water. So they're up to $500,000, a competitive reimbursement, I guess, reimbursement grants, but I think this is...
I think we gotta be careful, Paul, on that, because, Chris, again, if you wanna jump in, it's not public drinking water as we see it, so that's the problem.
We're going against towns that are trying to get money for dams that they actually use as a drinking supply. And they don't use it, so they're gonna say, why are we gonna give it to you when we could go to a town that's using it for drinking water purposes?
Point well taken.
But I like those ideas.
I did
Right,
see-
if,
Yeah?
Go ahead. I did see our honorable legislator
I
walk
see-
in the room a few minutes ago.
He's-
Mr. Notman is here.
He
And I
snuck,
know that
he snuck to the back, so...
He put something before, I think, the Ways and Means Committee at $250,000, I think, to
Al,
help you out.
Do you wanna come forward, Alan, and talk about it?
Have a seat.
Sorry about
Yeah. You got dragged in.
Good to see you. No, I don't want to take up too much of the, actually, I stopped up on another issue to see the media, but we were successful in the House budget a couple weeks ago of prevailing upon the Ways and Means Chair and the Speaker and the leadership of including $250,000 in the House version of the budget for the repair and upkeep of the dams at the Wiki-Piki. Now, the process is, the Senate actually today started debating their version of the budget. Senator Chandler and Senator Antonioni, as well as other people I'm close to in the Senate, have that information, and I'm hoping that that's included in the Senate budget as well. If it is, that's the best thing in the world that can happen, because it doesn't have to go to conference committee, and then we prevail upon our friends in the governor's office, our lieutenant governor, as well as others, to keep that there, and that would be administered through, probably through DCR, in working with Chris's office in the upkeep of the dams. It's a start. I know it's not the 1 to 1.5 million we feel we need, but it's a start. The dam safety fund, the account is only funded at about 5 million itself. So to get this chunk at this stage is significant, and it's a good start. Hopefully it'll incrementally lead us down the road to more monies for the upkeep of this dam. That being said, if the Senate, just procedurally, so the public and the board understand, if the Senate, for whatever reasons, do not include it in their budget, then it goes to conference committee, and it will become a negotiable item between the House and the Senate. And again, I'll push with my friends in the Ways and Means Committee on that conference committee to push hard for that for our towns. So it's a start. I was very happy that the people in Boston realized the sacrifice the people in our two towns are making for the upkeep of this natural resource. So that's where it stands today. The Senate literally just started debating their budget today. I've been on the phone personally with Senator Reeser on some district issues, and with Senator Antonioni and Senator Chandler's offices on different issues today, including the issues we discussed at Water Street earlier today.
Thank you. Go ahead, John.
So, Mr. Norton, do you know when the Senate's going to vote on this side?
Well, they started today. Today's Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. I mean, you would hope the Senate usually worked more because of their smaller size than anything else, works somewhat quicker than the House on this. So I would anticipate Friday or Monday that they'd be done Tuesday. Oh, that's right. That's right. Everybody's, I keep forgetting. We'll see everybody Monday. Early next week, if not the end of this week. And then we'll have some ideas, and I'll be able to come back to the boards once we find out. But I would suggest it would not hurt for our members, your members, and your constituents to call Senator Chandler and Senator Antonioni and any other contacts that they might have in the Senate to push for this particular amendment.
We have sent letters from the board,
Yeah,
Mr. Norton.
Sure.
Encouraging support.
phone
of that.
calls don't hurt either, but absolutely, and let them know.
appreciate it too.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, and the lucky thing is to, hopefully, is that we've got at least two senators advocating for it between Senator Antonioni and Senator Chandler. But it doesn't hurt to, the squeaky wheel gets the oil.
No question.
Absolutely.
Well, that's why I think if Sterling has a possessory interest, he also would have a financial obligation to make repairs. And I know that, some people are afraid of that, but the fact of the matter is, if we make the repairs and we keep the property, okay, for future use, I mean, I think that's clearly a public benefit to both communities. And, the land is all within Sterling, most of it's within Sterling's political boundaries. So there's no question that we have an important vested interest in that piece of property. You people have it because the fact of the matter, you may need it as a water supply at some point in the future. Hopefully not, but we don't know that, right? So I think if we work together, if we have a possessory interest, we will have a financial obligation too. And I don't think, and no one's saying that the town, Sterling wouldn't. But I think if we work together, we form that citizens committee to sort of be the, not the guardians of the place, but the curators, okay? And we can effectively manage it, we can take timber off of it. There's a lot that can be done.
And I think my only concern was really, as I mentioned earlier, was really the liability issue that we might have if we in fact were joint owners of this thing at this point, that if the dam was not fixed. Now, we're hearing that the dam is in fair condition at this point. If it was even brought up something better than that, that we might be able to use for a hydro facility or something like that, I would have absolutely no objection. That's certainly, that liability issue goes away. So I think that that's something that I think we really ought to look at, because that's potential money. It's a green project that we could certainly both get involved in. So.
But a lot of that starts off with, you really have to work out your CR with those people. And that's why I can't emphasize enough that you really have to strongly consider enacting that with the Division of Fisheries and Wildlife.
We are.
And I would ask if there's any possibility that we could get a copy of that, not necessarily as you're trying to work it out and change, but certainly as it was originally formulated. I think a document of some 27 pages or so. I've never read it. I would certainly like to look at it and see what.
I think it's changed considerably from the beginning, but Bob, I'll defer to you if you.
Give me an early version.
Not going to help us?
Not going to help you.
Okay, all right.
Well, very well. That's all I really have to say.
Thank you.
If you have anyone else have any?
Yeah, I just want to see if the rest of the board has any questions for neighbors from Sterling.
Thank you for coming, and your ideas are terrific, and it's nice to have the cooperation between the two towns discussing this issue.
Yeah. I hope we can continue. Maybe we'll come to Sterling on the next one.
Well,
That would be appreciated.
Our room's not quite this big.
What we could do, though, we have a forum for the Choxton School where we have plenty of room.
Sure.
And I really do think we ought to open this, continue this dialogue, push this issue down the road, and resolve it once and for all. Let's not leave it for our children to resolve.
I agree. And I do believe that we should incorporate the city of Leominster and the town of Lancaster also, and invite them to this. If they wish not to attend, that would be their decision, but I do believe that they would be interested also. I'm not sure with that, but I would like to believe that they'd be interested in preserving that type of property. And in closing, I would like to thank you for inviting us down here. This open dialogue is much better than reading about everything in the paper and finding out what was said and what wasn't said.
Don't believe everything in the paper.
There you go. I like that. And I too would like to echo their comments. Thank you very much for finally sitting down.
Thanks for coming in.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
I appreciate that.
Timing is on.
Congratulations. Thank you very much. It's a slip urgent, but so that's all right.
You guys need a 5-minute break, or you want to keep going?
night.
Congratulations.
We got one issue, and then we'll bring it back up here. On the Russia firm, we got the 20-year verbal on the update, so. Mike, I want to go back. We never got to the action list, and I was wondering if we could get get an update on the Rauscher Farm, where we are. I know we asked for the 21E. I know we got a verbal during the week. And I wonder if we can share that. I don't think that's anything that we can't share in public forum, Bob. We're not negotiating, but if you want, I can give it, or...
Sure, yep, no, absolutely. I did speak with a representative from CEA who's doing the work. They indicated that they're pretty much completed with their review except for one provision. The owner had disclosed to them in an interview that there was an underground storage tank removed from that property a number of years ago. So what they'd like to do is to do a soil sample from that area just to make sure that there was no release and that everything was okay. So at this point, they're hoping by the end of this week to get that sample and then try to make the town's deadline, which they had been given for that June 6th deadline. So I was hoping within a week or so.
We offered up Chris as some help. Did we?
Right, I spoke to Chris. He said that to let him know the date and time, and they would try to accommodate.
Yeah. We gotta take a get a hold of you as soon as possible. We'll have to dig safe that. We can't dig without doing dig safe.
Whatever we need to do.
Unless we dig by hand, I don't know how deep he wants to go, but we need to dig safe.
It's probably 6 feet down, Chris,
Yeah.
because you got to go to the bottom where the tank was.
And we have to dig safe. There's no way around that. So it's 72 hours before we can dig. So if he calls us tomorrow, it's next Tuesday or Wednesday.
Did he address those other issues with you, Mike, from the house?
Well, he just indicated that there, obviously as an old house, that there would be lead and asbestos issues, so that if the town was looking to have children, whatever the threshold, I forget the year, if it's 6 years old or whatever the threshold is, that young children, there would have to be a lead abatement, or if the building was going to be demolished, that there would need to be an asbestos abatement before demolition. So as being an old house, those are issues that you deal with in an old structure, and that they did identify that as part of the residence that will be part of the purchase on that property as well. But they felt that use-wise in their research, that they didn't find anything else that really jumped out at them other than those issues of the tank in the house.
And once we see the report, I'm sure we'll review it. Let us know if there's any steps or, I guess, cost that we need to look at that we haven't planned for. Anything else, Mike? I skipped right over the action list, so I didn't know if there was any other comments you wanted to make. That was one area I'd like to update.
Yeah, I think maybe for the next meeting, I'll have maybe reduce that a bit to go through and eliminate some of those items that we've already in ongoing discussions, or things that have already been completed, or things that are just, in other jurisdictions that we're not going to be involved in. So I'll revise that for the next meeting.
Thank you. Mr. Naughton, would you like to
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
address the board?
Incredibly brief.
Well, now, I've never known you to be brief.
No,
but
that's unfair, Mr. Chairman. Could be brief and dry.
We'll see.
It's a pleasure to be here. I'm glad I got here in time to participate for a short bit in that discussion with Sterling. And I want to thank the board for this newfound openness with the town of Sterling. It certainly makes my job as the representative for both towns much easier when the two boards are talking. And I compliment you, and it's a breath of fresh air, and I think it's going to lead. I don't think this has to be the only issue that we have group and regional discussions on. I can imagine many other issues, potentially cost-saving issues for both towns in the future, and other towns, if we have this communication going on. And I want to take this opportunity to congratulate Selectman Sheridan and Selectman LeBlanc. It's my first public opportunity to meet with you, and great campaigns every candidate ran, and it was very the issues were talked about, and you did well, and you're a success. I compliment you, and I look forward to working with you. And really, the final thing I just want to say is point out, we had a fantastic meeting, a very open dialogue with Selectman LeBlanc, Selectman Dickout, Selectman Sheridan, with, as your subcommittee with the housing people, with people from Council on Aging, the Director of Housing down at the Water Street Housing Project today to discuss some of the issues down there, which we all know it's the oldest housing project in the town, and it really needs a lot of updates. And I'm glad to say we have an administration in Boston now that will listen, hopefully, to the legislature on housing issues, and this is just the start. In addition to the $50,000 earmark that was placed in the budget in the House budget for updates down there, we've been informed today that the State Department of Housing and Community Development is awarding $18,000 to the town of Clinton for emergency electrical updates at the Water Street Housing Project. So that's great work on behalf of the Housing Director and our Economic Development Director in town in applying for those grants. They called me today and faxed this out, and so congratulations to the town for this, and thanks for everybody's hard work. But I thought the board would like to know. So, that's it. That was pretty brief, wasn't it, Mr. Chairman? Thank you very much. Again, welcome and congratulations.
I think he should be commended for the time that he really puts in
Absolutely.
for the town of Clinton and the surrounding communities that he represents.
Thank you, Mary.
You know, I know you're a busy guy, but you'd never forget the communities that you're elected to represent, and we thank you.
Thank you. My father always said, never forget the little guy. Not that I'm anything more. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Gloria, would you like to address the group? Please, we've heard already on the Wiki-Piki and Rauscher from a friend of yours there, but if you can be brief, please be brief. We've still got to go into executive session.
Right, okay.
So,
but these are remarks that are prompted, I mean, what I would like to comment on is that we are sort of in a very difficult position now in terms of the timeline, in terms of the Wiki-Piki CR, and in terms of the self-help grant. And that's my concern. And I'm also concerned that it reveals another, to me, a very serious matter that I think as a town it would behoove us to pay some attention to. In other words, Wiki-Piki is the cautionary tale in many ways. I noted, and I promise you I do not believe every word that's printed in the press, but when it was commented that the present board is being pushed in signing off on the conservation on the Wiki-Piki and its water, and I do know that people get misquoted and sentences and statements are taken out of context, etc. But it does draw attention to the fact that we have reached this point when we are right up against losing the self-help grant. For me, I think it's important that the self-help grant it's taxpayer money. It's money that the taxpayer would be paying over the price of the bond, seeing it was the taxpayers that voted for the tax override. And I treat that as as the engaged citizen very seriously, that it's taxpayers' money. I will be very disquieted if that money goes away because a CR cannot be signed in sufficient time on the Wiki-Piki. But I'll also be disquieted for another reason. It's the time factor. Wiki-Piki is not new, as we all know. It's actually been going on for decades. But as Attorney Gibbons so succinctly pointed out 2 weeks ago at the meeting here, that in 2001 we actually saw what was the beginning of a new chapter in the long-running saga of Wiki-Piki that seemed to promise progress. And this was the chapter when the people voted for the mutually accepted CR between the town and the state to be worked out. I appreciate that Selectman Dickout was a selectman at that time and so was familiar with Wiki-Piki. But since then, 7 years have passed, and Wiki-Piki has not been in the forefront, at least as far as the public. However, in the last 12 months, it has, and you, Chairman Haley, and Tony, Selectman Fiorentino, is very familiar with it. I know that Selectman LeBlanc has been attending meetings before the election and became well-versed in Wiki-Piki, even though not privy to the executive sessions, and I'm sure that likewise Selectman Sheridan did her homework very diligently in the run-up to the election. So everybody's been well-versed in this. It is not a new issue. But the point is that what this reveals to me is how long does it take for the voters to make a decision and then for action to happen? And that's where I see Wiki-Piki as a cautionary tale. So we have a time lag of 7 years. This does cause me concern as an engaged citizen that policy-making decisions take so long to be executed. It's even more of concern because I know this board has been discussing its role of evolving out of the day-to-day administration into becoming a policy-making body. And I know that there's the discussion on the warrant and what the legalities of that is for the administrator taking on more of the day-to-day running and allowing you the time to free up.
Gloria, your point.
Okay,
I hear
my
what
point.
you're saying. You're asking us to move forward. We're trying. So if that's the point you're trying to make, this board is trying awful hard to move forward
But I
on
understand.
both issues. And I understand the time constraints.
But I heard, I don't know if this is correctly, when I came into this meeting a bit late, that it was, I thought that it was said that there would not be time to do the CR in time to get the self-help
The correct
grant.
response was, I believe that it may not be enough time to get this done. I'm being realistic. So,
Mr. Chairman, if I can,
Tony's been go ahead, Tony.
I mean, I'm, you know, you have your opinion.
Yeah.
I'm going to have mine. I respectfully disagree. I think we do have time, and I think it's prudent on us to do what we have to do as a board to make sure that there is ample time based on the will of the people. And I claim, just my brief conversation with Bob O'Connor, who kind of got the grant application executed for us, and he says if we have the CR language in place and we get that filed into the Registry of Deeds, we're done. That's the only thing left to do.
Well, Tony, you gotta close the property too.
Right.
Right.
And I just want,
Yeah.
sign the CR, and I'm just gonna make it clear to everyone here, we are still in negotiations with the state. We're gonna go into executive session tonight to talk about the latest terms that have been proposed. And if the board's inclined to, once we go back to the state and there is a mutually acceptable CR, that thing, then you still gotta move forward with the closing on Rochelle Farm. One of the issues that people have been ignoring, and it's been brought up a few times, is there's a house up there with a tenant in there that's on that property.
That may have led, from what we're hearing.
Well, they may, I just want to be clear, I mean, that's an issue that has nothing to do with the CR, but has to do with the closing. I mean, there's a piece of property up there that's on the Rochelle Farm that there is a tenant in there that, that the tenant is still there as of today. So that issue still has to be addressed. So, the problem, the timing is, Gloria, is extremely tight, because you've got to close, my understanding is you've got to close on the property in early June in order for the final paperwork to be processed to actually get the funding from that grant. So, time is of the essence, but it's not totally as simple as signing the CR. You still got to close on that property. You got to finish the study that CEA is doing. You got to get that back. So, I just want people to know there's still some hurdles that have to get over. You don't just close on a $3 million piece of property. I mean, you think about when you buy your house. I mean, there's hurdles that we have to jump over. So I just want everyone to be clear on that. It's not as simple as signing the CR and then it's a done deal. We still have to close on the property.
And I agree. I mean, I think it is a very complicated business. My concern is that the delays that have come until we are now down to the 11th and three-quarter hour, and I see that as an engaged citizen and as that very big grant that would be going to engage citizens, I feel,
Gloria,
it's how we got here. It's how we got here.
That's your opinion, Mark. So
Yes, it is, and it's a strongly held one.
That's fine.
I'll just address one other point too, on the 7-year delay. Any CR, like the CR for the Wiki-Piki, it requires legislative approval. I mean, people can't lose sight of the fact that that land up there is already restricted. The town of Clinton can't do what it wants with that land. That land was when it was taken back in the 1800s for the reservoirs, it's restricted. If we want to do anything with that land right now, forget the CR, we'd have to get legislative approval. We just can't sell that land. It requires 2/3 vote of the legislation. So when that memorandum of understanding was entered in 2001, we had to get, the state had to enact legislation to allow us to give a CR not only in this part, but the property that over on Mossy Pond, which was part of that same transaction. That legislation didn't get passed until sometime mid-2004. So you lost 3.5 years right there. I mean, nothing could be done until after, you know, the legislator had to pass that legislation or the whole deal would have fallen apart. So, yeah, 7 years has gone by, but it wasn't all town issues. I mean, some of it's state. I mean, the state moves at a slow pace on certain issues.
And, you know, Gordon, the other point I want to make is that the Friends of Rauscher Farm, who was ever working on this grant, knew up front that this was a hurdle. And they tried, and believe me, because Tony, every 2 weeks, would tell us, we need to move forward, we need to move forward. So it wasn't like we weren't trying here. Now, everything that is supposed to be done is being done right now. So I hear your concerns, I empathize with you, but I gotta tell you.
I need to be an engaged citizen.
To keep, I know, I just.
You know, and I need to keep.
Stay engaged.
Yeah, that's what I need to do, because there are many people that, you know, feel strongly too, so.
Yeah, that's fine.
Citizen.
I agree.
But just to the point about closing on the property is the final step for the grant, but the CR doesn't depend on closing on the property, right? So
no.
I just want to make, it's obvious to us here, but I'll just make that distinction.
Is under that purchase and sale agreement, Rauscher,
If, for example, Mr. Rauscher comes back and says, hey, I'm not getting that tenant out of there for another 3 months, he's got the right to do that, because under that purchase and sale agreement, he doesn't have to close until December of 2008. Now, of course, he's the seller, so, you know, he has incentive to close sooner because he's getting the money, but if he wants to, he can say, I'm not closing in June, I'm closing 3 months from there because I want to get this tenant time to find another location. I mean, I haven't heard that yet, but I'm just saying, that's something that we have no control over.
We haven't got to that point because we're trying to tie up some other procedures that we need to do. So, it's not like everything can happen at once.
No, I know, but there I go, I have to be the one. That's why you're on your side of the table and why I'm on this one.
You have a nice evening.
And to you
I'd
too.
like to make a couple of points while
Sure,
Gloria's still here.
Sure.
Joyce brought up a couple of points earlier, and I'd like to make a couple of points very clear. First of all, many of the issues surrounding the Wiki-Piki and the conservation restriction came up within the last 6 months. Many of us weren't aware of some of the things that were involved in this. I mean, the Nestle deal brought a lot of this to the forefront. I have been a member of this board for exactly 2 meetings. This is the second one. So I'm not sure how much you would like me to accomplish in that time, especially since I still have not seen the CR. The other part is a lot of this business, you have to weigh the business of the community against the passion of being involved in environmental and protection. I've been an officer and a member of the Board of Directors for South Meadow Pond and Wildlife Association for almost 10 years. I have been a member of the Clinton Greenway Conservation Trust Group for almost the same amount of time. So I'm very impassioned about protection of our resources. But I also have to balance that out with the needs of the community and having to understand what our rights are to protect the town. And I still have to read the CR, all 27 pages, to understand what it is we're looking at. Do I want to move forward? Yes. But I want to do it correctly and in the best interest of the community as a whole. And I think we'll do that. Thank you.
Very well said. There's no other business this evening. I'll accept a motion to go into executive session, and we may or may not come back out of that executive session. Do we have that motion?
Yes, I do. I'll move it, Mr. Chairman.
We have a
Second it. Second it.
Any discussion? Roll call vote.
Aye.
Jim? You're right. Kathy? Tony? Mayor
Aye.
Rose? And Kevin. Chair votes aye.
Mr. Chairman, I would ask for 5 minutes.
And we'll go 5-minute break before we go into executive session. Thank you.